Hi y'all, this is Larry from Deep South Texas, and today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful and easy potato bread. Let's get started. And here are the ingredients. We have 2½ cups of bread flour. I'm using King Arthur. We have 1 tablespoon of instant yeast. I'm using Fleischmann's instant yeast. We have 1½ teaspoons of salt. We have 1/2 cup of water, room temperature, 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and then 1/2 cup of mashed potatoes. Now, since there is moisture in the mashed potatoes and we don't really know how much, we're going to start off with 1/2 cup of water. We may add a little bit more water along the way, or if it's too dry, or a little bit more flour if it's too wet. Let's get started. First, we're going to mix up our wet ingredients, which is the water, the oil, and the mashed potatoes. Let's get these all mixed together. There, that looks pretty good. Let's set this aside for a minute and mix our dry ingredients. So we have our flour, and then since I'm using instant yeast, I can mix that right in with the flour. If you're using a different kind of yeast, just follow the directions with the yeast that you're using. Dry active yeast, maybe you need to add that to the wet ingredients first and let it set for a while. So we got the yeast mix in. Now we're going to add the salt. Mix that up. Trying to be careful not to knock it out of the bowl. And now we're going to add our wet ingredients to this mixture. And get this all mixed up. I think it's going to feel a little dry to begin with, but as we work with it, those potatoes will tend to moisten it up a little bit. So, as I sort of expected, it is feeling really dry, and I think I'm going to have to add a little bit more water. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of water and see how that does. I think that'll help quite a bit. So I ended up adding another tablespoon of water, 2 tablespoons in all. Again, it's going to vary for you. It sort of depends upon how wet your mashed potatoes are. So now we're just going to let this dough sit for 15 minutes and let all the flour get hydrated. Our dough has been resting 15 minutes. Let's take it out and knead it. So we're going to knead it for about 5 minutes. Now, you could do this in a stand mixer. In fact, you could do all the mixing in a stand mixer and the kneading in a stand mixer if you want. It's actually a little bit easier for me just to knead it by hand, because getting out the stand mixer and getting it set up is actually quite a bit of work. So I don't have it normally setting on the counter. I say we're going to knead this for about 8 minutes. So the dough has been feeling a little bit too dry to me, so I've added about another tablespoon of water while I'm going through the kneading process. And I just added a little bit at a time, put it on, and just continue to knead. You may need to do the same thing. So the dough has been kneaded. I've added a little bit of olive oil to the bowl. I'm just going to roll our dough around in there a little bit and then cover it back up. And we're going to let it set for 1 hour to rise. So my dough has been rising for an hour, and it's looking pretty good. The temperature in my kitchen is about 73 degrees Fahrenheit. If your temperature is a little lower, it might take a little longer to rise. If your temperature is a little higher, it will probably rise a little faster. We're going to punch this down and put it back on our board and do a pre-shaping. We're just going to flatten it out a little bit and shape it back up into a ball. Just after you flatten it out, bring the corners up. And what we're trying to do is just build tension on the top of the, or what's really now the bottom of the dough, so that it bakes up a little bit nicer. Now I'll just sprinkle a little bit of flour on top. And we'll cover that and let it rest for 15 minutes. When that 15 minutes is up, we'll do the final shaping and we'll put it in a loaf pan for its final rise. And this loaf pan is 9.5 inches from across the top, 5.5 inches across the side, and it's 3 inches deep. And I will be buttering this pan before I put the dough in it. The dough has been resting for 15 minutes, and now it's time to do our final shaping. We just flip it over, kind of pat it out like we did before. And then we want to fold it over into kind of a trapezoid shape. A little bit narrower on the top than on the bottom. And we want the bottom to be a little bit wider here, so about the size of the pan we're going to put it in. So we'll continue to push that down until we get the size that we want. And that's pretty close. So now we'll begin rolling it up. Get that seam all pinched together. And we'll dust it all over with a little flour. Including the edges. And then we'll place that seam side down into our loaf pan. And now we'll cover that and we'll let that rise for another hour. The dough has risen and it's time to get this bread in the oven. Now the oven has been preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to bake this for 35 to 40 minutes. I'll be checking it at 35 minutes to see how it's doing. Also, about in the middle of that time frame, I will rotate the loaf pan 180 degrees in the oven. Let's get it in the oven. And here it is. Looks pretty nice. Now let's brush that with a little bit of melted butter. So here is our loaf of easy potato bread. We're going to let that cool down a little bit, and then we're going to slice into it and see what it tastes like. So this bread is looking good. Potato bread. I will put the ingredients I used in the description of the video. All in all, I used about 3/4 cup of water. I started with a 1/2 cup and then added a little bit more at a time as I thought it was needed. You'll probably end up doing the same thing. So I think this bread is almost cool. Let's slice into it and see what it looks like inside. Well, that looks pretty nice. Looks pretty nice. Nice and soft. And I think that's one of the things with potato bread. It's a very soft bread, and I think it will stay soft over a long period of time. Let's put a little butter on this slice here and give it a try.
Tastes great. So I think this will become a regular here in Deep South Texas. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.